Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest from council members this evening? Councillor Wilkinson?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, report number 3 regarding Bergen. I declare conflict on that one.
Okay. Okay. Move on to adoption of council minutes then. Looking for a mover and seconder for the minutes the council held December 14th. Councillor Dunn, Councillor Hammond. Discussion on that motion. All in favor of that motion? And carried. Is there any business arising out of those minutes? I see none. We'll move on to public meetings. There are none this evening. Reports of staff and delegations. So we have several of them this evening to get through. First one is a report regarding a zoning amendment application. And I suspect Danielle is taking us through this to start.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson, members of council. This is a follow-up report to a public meeting that was hosted in October of this year. That public meeting was for a zoning bylaw amendment for the properties across the street, our Chevrolet GM dealership, so at 108 Erie Street North, 4 and 6 Ivan, as well as 9 and 13 Foundry Street. The purpose of that application was twofold. One, the first purpose was to allow the car dealership at 108 Erie, 4 and 6 Ivan. The second part of that was to allow for the parking area to be expanded onto 9 and 13 Foundry Street. So at the public meeting, we received comments from IRCA. They had no issues and they'd like to be involved in the site plan process. We also received comments from one abutting property owner of a residential lot at 17 Foundry. They noted that if council did approve the expansion, that they were requesting that the appropriate buffering be put in place between the commercial and the residential uses. So just as a reminder of what this amendment is looking to do, the amendment will have two effects. The first is that the existing car dealership will become a permitted use at 108 Erie Street North and 4 and 6 Ivan Street. So the property is currently zoned C1, and C1 does not permit a car dealership. Those properties were formerly zoned C2, a highway commercial, and it did allow for the car dealership. So right now, the dealership would require additional approvals if it wanted to expand or if it wanted to change, or it would be required to relocate. This amendment requests that this use be site-specifically permitted in this location based on its historic suitability at this site, its economic contribution to the surrounding commercial area, and its continuation of employment opportunities within the settlement area. The proposed use, so the car dealership, it conforms to the underlying official plan designation, and it can be allowed even though it's not permitted in the C1 zone. The use has been shown to conform to the policies that allow us to change and amend the zoning bylaw. The use has been shown historically to be suitable for the car dealership. It is adequately serviced by municipal services as well as the abutting road system, and it has been shown to be historically compatible with the surrounding uses for the most part. Administration is in a position to support this portion of the amendment. The second part of the request is to allow two properties, and it's the two properties that are highlighted in yellow on the screen. They are currently designated and zoned for residential, and the request is to allow them to be developed for the establishment or the expansion of the existing car parking area onto these two properties. A planning justification report was submitted with the application, and that report suggested that the policies within our official plan, specifically section 7.16, the interpretation clause, support the approval of this amendment. At the public meeting, administration advised that it was not in support of the application based on that policy, and it recommended that an official plan amendment would be required. Administration suggested that if the interpretation clause was to be applied in this manner as a broad brush power, additional justification should be provided for consideration. A supplementary memo was submitted noting that this clause has been included in the OP to allow for this flexible interpretation of lines, including land use designations. A copy of that memo has been attached to the report for council's reference. It is administration's opinion that the memo does not demonstrate that it is appropriate or that it is good planning to be flexible with the interpretation of the official plan policies in this case. The suggested approach is an attempt to avoid using or processing an official plan amendment. So the town is asking that the applicant process an official plan amendment to change the designation of 9 and 13 from residential to commercial. The exercise of going through an official plan amendment would be used to ensure that a full review of the long-term and short-term impacts of the proposed change has been considered. The suggested approach could lead to repeated requests for expansions for other commercial lands into residential neighborhoods without the necessary review. An OPEA review would also review the current land uses on the site, specifically why the applicant needs to use additional residential lands for commercial purposes when the existing dwelling at 6 Ivan remains assessed residentially, has not been converted to allow a commercial use, and is currently zoned commercial as well. Section 7.16 is not appropriate in this case, as the OP must be read in full, and sections cannot be read in isolation. The planning justification does not acknowledge the policies which protect residential neighborhoods from commercial intrusions. An OPA would also review the long-term impact of the proposed use as it's proposed for only a parking lot, and whether we would look at whether or not it's in the best interest of the commercial area to include other commercial uses. For these reasons, the amendment, this part of the amendment as presented cannot be supported in full. At this time, it is administration's recommendation that the applications as presented are deferred, that the applicant be required to submit an official plan amendment application, that from there, a legislative public meeting would be scheduled where we would bring forward the necessary mapping change for council support, together possibly with a final site plan for approval to allow for that expansion.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions from council before I go to Ms. Lasling, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Danielle, I missed that last meeting because I was on holiday. So you're telling us in a nutshell, you're fine with those two properties basically being switched over, the ones on Foundry. You just feel it needs to go through the process of the official plan amendment. Okay, because I was going to argue with you if you didn't think that. But no, because I wasn't clear on that in the report if that was the case or not, because I missed that last meeting. So anyway, for the reasons you just stated, yes, I'm fine with that as long as it's not going to take 7 months to do this, or will it?
As suggested, we are required to go through the legislative planning, under the planning process, we are required to host the public meeting. We've already had a public meeting. We didn't receive a number of complaints or concerns. So really, it's just complying with that legislation. So we would schedule the public meeting. That requires notice, so 20 days notice. Have the public meeting, bring forward the recommendation. It could be approved that evening or at the following meeting. We forward that to the county for approval. I've completed some pre-consultation with the county with respect to the necessary mapping change. It's a minor mapping change, and the county then would be the approval authority. So I can't comment on their time, but I would anticipate that due to the holidays, we're probably within a 2-month time frame.
Thank you. Well, then we're looking at least probably by spring if all goes well. Okay, and no one's going to be putting in a parking lot at this time of year. Anyway, okay, that's great. You answered my questions. I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Jacobs?
Thank you, Worship. Just one question for Danielle. I took you correctly if we didn't do this independently of an official plan agreement, we could be setting precedent. Is that what you insinuated?
So for the reasons listed within the report, we've given some reasons why this would perhaps, it requires the overall review, a little bit of a larger review. At the previous meeting, we had asked, could you give us some justification to use that clause? Tell us why it's appropriate in this case, and it's administration's opinion that the memo came back, didn't tell us why it was appropriate in this case. It was just saying you have the ability to interpret the line wherever you want. So council does have the ability to interpret it. However, you would want to be able to say, why did you think it was appropriate in this case? We asked the consultant to present that.
Okay. So I know we have another report here from Jackie Lasland, and I assume you want to present to council as well?
Thank you. I'm not going to go through it in detail. Council's already seen my presentation. I do want to show you, to answer a couple of issues that were raised by Danielle. When an application is submitted, it's submitted and reviewed under its own merit. An application does not create a precedent. We don't have a circumstance where this application and decisions made here will have an impact on any future applications. It does not create that precedent, and council takes every application into consideration under its own merit. That's one aspect. The official plan amendment. You're taking a look at a property that's located within a mixed-use neighborhood. The property has directly across the street Hutchins Monument. You have a property where the majority of the property is presently being used for commercial, and we have two adjacent properties that are going to be used for a parking lot area. So the question bodes, you have a high-level document of your official plan. When do you amend your official plan? Well, when you have a significant policy change, or you have a significant land use that you're introducing that warrants an amendment. In this circumstance, you have a policy that gives you the flexibility to say a change of your official plan isn't needed for this circumstance, to allow for that property to be used for commercial purposes in a mixed-use neighborhood where the adjacent property has been used for commercial for all these years. So, in my professional opinion, can this property be considered commercial under the official plan designation? If the municipality so wishes to have the Schedule A amended at a future date when you're going through your 5-year review, I believe that's presently under consideration now, that schedule can be changed at that time. You can have the right to move designation lines any way you wish. My point of issue is this: an official plan amendment isn't required at this time. It is a huge process that really will take a number of months to facilitate nothing. That can't be resolved under the 5-year review or isn't really necessary in my professional opinion. So I guess in summation, I request that council consider both components of the bylaw being asked tonight, approve the amendment, and allow my client to continue to put a parking lot on that area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions from council? Councillor Wilkinson?
Thank you. I guess how dire is the need to get this parking lot expansion going? You heard Danielle say here earlier that, you know, we're going to have this back to us. It says here in the report, hopefully sometime at the end of January. We had the public meeting. As Hilda said, it'll be done here before spring. Going tonight the way this is, I don't see you getting shovels in the ground anyway with the seasons we're in right now. I don't see why we can't go through the process, doing it the correct way, as Danielle's stated it.
Well, in my professional opinion, I don't feel an official plan amendment is necessary. So that answers that one component. Actually, it is dire. We have the firebox property that's bursting. We really need to get that aspect of the property utilized for parking. It is the intent to move ahead with this as soon as possible, removing the 2 homes in order to put the parking lot expansion up. We've gone through site plan review. We have a very extensive site plan, landscaping, buffering, fencing, everything is ready to go. We're just waiting for council decision at this point.
And thank you. I'm somewhat sympathetic to your situation because this business has been there since the 60s, and by no fault of your own, 2009 we had a bylaw amendment. And be that as it may, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
But I think that we need to stay fair and consistent. You know, if we are flexible with our bylaws here, you know, like you said, Hutchins Byman's across the road, it is a mixed bag over there. We could have the others come in and asking us to be flexible with the rules there as well. And I think we're heading down, you know, a road maybe we don't want to take. As Councillor Jacobs said, we're setting precedent. And I agree with what he said there. That's my thoughts. I'll be supporting the recommendation set up by Danielle to do the OP amendment. That's my thoughts, at least.
Okay. Councillor Hammond?
Your Worship, thank you. Jackie, in light of the fact that, you know, we had talked about the urgency of needing the parking, I wondered why the buildings currently owned on 6 Ivan haven't been taken down and utilized that space.
Well, actually,
And you knew I was going to ask that.
Yeah, a request for a demolition permit has been taken out to remove both of the houses on Foundry as well as the house on Ivan. So they are coming down. They had a tenant in Ivan Street, and Danielle raised a concern that there was still a tenant there, and they then went through the process of evicting the tenant, and it's now vacant and able to come down.
No other questions? Just from my perspective to you, Jackie, I think we've been pretty clear, and I didn't realize that you weren't here for that one meeting, but council has been pretty clear to admin, and I think admin pretty clear to us too, that we're all in favor of this moving ahead. What we want to do is just follow the right steps, and Danielle has been very adamant, persuasive, I don't know, but you know, directing us to do things the right way. And I can see where if we kind of turned a blind eye in this situation, we'd be turning a blind eye and maybe not setting a precedent like you said, but it sure makes our wheels a lot more wobbly the next time somebody comes in and says, well, we want to do this too. So I guess my question to you is, I'm assuming, Danielle, on page 12 of 51, those bullet points in there are the questions that you were asking of Ms. Lasleen to help you then come to council and say, this is why we should do this? So is there any reason those answers can't be given?
Actually, I believe I did provide them in my memo. I guess we just have a difference of opinion. My
Okay.
position is, it does conform with the official plan, and an OPA is necessary.
Okay.
It's
So then it's really your
A
opinion, our opinion,
redundant
and...
and unnecessary process.
Okay, all right. Well, then, I will leave it up to council to make the decision. Councillor Hammond?
Yes, Your Worship, thanks again. And if I may, I'd like to address this to Danielle. I'm wondering, Danielle, and you're going to have to help me with the policy, but in light of the fact that we've already had one public meeting, and I was here for that, and we really didn't have much voice in opposition to this, why is it necessary to have a second one? Because as you pointed out, it's already looking at a 20 or 30-day delay.
So we are requesting that a new application be submitted under under that section of the Planning Act. You have a requirement to provide notice that you're also changing the official plan. So we would have to fulfill that notice.
Okay. So we do have a recommendation. Oh, Councillor Jacobs?
Thank you, Worship. I'll move the recommendation.
Okay. Support by Councillor Wilkinson. Discussion on that motion? All in favor of the motion? And carried. So we'll focus on early January and get this moving ahead as quickly as we can. Next item on the agenda is a report regarding the application for site plan control, proposed shop addition, Highway 77, and Danielle again. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. I will be presenting for Denise this evening. So the municipality has received a site plan application for 538 Highway 77. It is Highway 77 Truck Services. That property is located just north of Road 5 on the east side of Highway 77, and it's just over 4 acres in area. The property is designated Highway 77 Corridor Commercial in the official plan, and it is zoned C4, or Commercial Industrial, in the zoning bylaw. And that zone permits truck service, sales, storage, and dispatch. So this is a permitted use on the site. The owner is looking to construct an addition to the building, approximately 2,000 square feet in area, and it is for an additional service bay. The site plan, as well as the stormwater management plan, have been reviewed by staff. The site plan is in compliance with the zoning bylaw. In this case, we just have a few items that are outside of the standard site plan agreement, and we're seeking council's direction on those. So the first item is that administration's position is that all parking areas are required to be hard surfaced, and this is a requirement in the zoning bylaw. And so the property is highlighted in red. It's a little difficult to see on this screen the area that is existing as gravel and the area that is proposed to be developed as gravel. That's showing on the site plan that's attached. We do require the hard surfacing of commercial and industrial properties, and that's to maintain a high standard of development to ensure that the area is visually pleasing, and it also serves to protect other uses in the area by reducing or eliminating nuisance complaints that we get from gravel parking areas, so noise, dust, mud, etc. The applicant is asking that the entrance area on the property be the area that is required to be hard surfaced, and that the remainder contain clear stone and be subject to additional dust control measures in the site plan agreement. So again, it is the municipality's, to the satisfaction of the municipality is what the requirements for the hard surfacing is. It's the recommendation of staff that all of the areas be hard surfaced. So we're asking council to provide direction on what would be appropriate for this existing business. The second item that we are looking for council direction on is the buffering that must be provided, in particular in the areas along the abutting residential properties. So those are the residential properties that front on Highway 77. So the OP states that adequate buffering is required between different land uses where there may be a conflict. So we've got commercial, industrial, abutting existing residential. Administration is recommending that a privacy fence be constructed at the rear of the residential lots from 540 Highway 77, so I think that's everyone's the Fittler residence, up to 548. The applicant is suggesting that perhaps due to the nature of the business, that a chain link fence with suitable landscaping could be provided. And that that is acceptable by staff. We just need to get to the details of that. So we just need further details in the site plan to tell us the number of plantings, the type of plantings, where those plantings will be, and when they will be installed. Administration is suggesting that the buffering, the fence that's needed for the buffering along the residential areas should be installed within the 1-year time period of the site plan. The applicant does show a perimeter fence around the entire operation, so that deals with the new security requirements for trucking, and has a longer term plan for that, and would like to be able to install the fence at that time. With respect to the other issues, this property is subject to MTO. MTO has reviewed the site plan and is generally fine with it. The applicant will be required to obtain the necessary land use permits prior to Bashara being able to issue a building permit. We are proposing that the standard site plan agreement be put in place, subject to direction with respect to the hard surfacing as well as the buffering that's necessary from the residential development. You can see that within the recommendation. Further to that, it's the standard site plan agreement.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions from council to Danielle? Councillor Hammond?
Again, Your Worship, thank you. Just a question, if I can, Danielle, for my benefit. When we refer to hard surface, being installed, I mean, I'm aware of cement and asphalt, but the ground asphalt that you're seeing used more and more often all the time and compacted, is that considered a hard surface?
I'm not in a position to state whether or not we would accept that, so that's something that our engineering department would review based on their requirements that pulls in site plan control, pavement marking, that type of thing, and they would be able to provide that answer. So at this time, I'm not in a position to say.
Okay. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I took a drive down 77, and there are certainly a lot of driveways down that stretch of highway that do not have hard surface. But I'm also very familiar with the complaints that we have from the residents that live adjacent to Nassif Trucking. And I get a call from one resident probably every 4 to 6 weeks, and he's not a happy camper. And none of those residents came to the meeting that we had in the old town hall. No one complained, and at that time I remember shaking my finger and saying, somebody's going to live to regret this, I know it, because the proximity of the backyards to the dirt and the driveway, you know it's going to cause somebody grief at some time. So even though we're not consistent on Highway 77 with every property, I would really like to avoid happening what's happened to us with Nassif Trucking.
Okay. Nothing? Yep, absolutely.
Thank you. I've got a PowerPoint presentation. Can I come up? Yeah, I noticed, yeah, my memo was left off the agenda. Okay. Okay, let me, okay, so I want to take council through, so council understands. The existing site plan is registered on title for the development that's presently in place. What we're asking for tonight is an amendment to allow for a 40 by 40 foot, 1,600 square foot addition to an existing building. Okay? The owner has been at this site for a number of years. I believe it was 20 years that this development has been there. From my understanding, Peralta Engineering, when they were dealing with this issue, solicited comments from the neighbors, and the neighbors were not concerned about the dust. Their houses are close to Highway 77, far enough separated, and the property adjacent to and closest to, there is an existing hard board fence providing that privacy. We're providing in detail, in addition, mature trees, and the details have been provided on the site plan. I believe there was a site plan provided in your council agenda that shows the mature trees, the location and the details of that to the back of the board fence. In the other areas, there's an existing mature tree line. This is going to be proposed for the parking of transport trucks that will be within a secured location. The intent is to put up a chain link fence. It is 4.2 acres in area. It's a huge property. What my client is recommending, which is a great solution to address the concerns of your deputy mayor, of the dust. Down here we have limestone. That gravel that you put down on your driveway creates a dust. What he's proposing is an expensive, clear aggregate that's a composition of granite and marble that when you put it down does not create dust. It does not contain limestone. Those trucks will be able to go over it without creating a dust. Also, within the agreement for the property, by all means, if there is dust created by any activity, put the requirement of a dust suppressant. If one of the neighbors says, hey, my neighbor's creating dust, have a requirement of a dust suppressant. But 4.2 acres to be paved, hard surfaced, is just uneconomical and will destroy the project and any development that the owner is looking to do on the property. The fence, as I indicated, he's proposing in compliance with the MTO standards of putting a chain link fence around the entire perimeter of the property. A board fence would be redundant to have a board fence and then a chain link fence. The mature trees that are there and the chain link fence will create the buffer that's necessary at the back of properties that have lived cohabitating for a number of years without complaint. The time frame, so that addresses the landscape being asked for, that addresses the hard surfacing being asked for, the time frame. My client is looking for an extension. Your agreement speaks to 1 year completion of all the requirements that have been identified in this amending agreement, my client is saying it is so expensive to do a 4.2 acre chain link fence to the MTO standards that he would like to see a 2 or a 3-year opportunity to satisfy that condition. It's not an issue that he doesn't want to put the chain link fence up, but he'd like some time to be able to do it. Now, with that, there's going to be an additional amendment that will be coming forward for the property to the south of this, that he has purchased and cleaned up and removed a lot of the debris that was on that property that was quite an eyesore. And part of that, the expense of purchasing that to clean it up, is really where the cost of the fence has been taken up. So there's the 3 items that my client's looking for. One is the ability to put aggregate instead of the hard surfacing. 2, accept the chain link fence with the mature landscaping at the back. And 3, to allow for the 3-year time frame. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions from council? None? Councilor Wilkinson?
I guess it's more of a comment. I look at it this way. I've heard the same complaints from residents on Oak Street when it came to another trucking facility off of Oak Street, and they're adamant over there. And I'm very sympathetic towards them. It is a dusty mess in their backyards, their front doors, their windows over on Oak Street. I'm glad that Leamington does have a bylaw like this that requires people to hard service it right. It says in here that the lands to the north on Highway 77 are important to us. They're going to be built up in years to come. We want to set the right example out there. If I were a neighbor there, I'd be so glad that we had this hard surface bylaw in place. That's a lot of trucks you're talking here. We're saying 30, 47, and 22 parking spots are being created. You're going to be moving a lot of rigs around the back end there, and I don't care what kind of solution you come up with. If it's limestone, clear stone, whatever, you say it's an expensive, an expensive option. I'd say take the money and put that into the hard surface. I kind of look at it this way. If you're going to get into, I'm all for you expanding your business, and good luck to you. I hope you do. But if you're going to get into the business, I think you got to put in the proper infrastructure to support it, and that's being the hard surface here. I'm going to support the recommendation.
Councilor Dunn?
Through you, Your Worship. I guess the question for me is regarding the chain link when it comes to the residents. Even though you have mature trees, chain link, and you have the truck lights coming into this somebody's backyard, that in that portion of the when it comes to the residentials, I can see why the wood fence would come. I don't see it in the back part backing onto the other farms, but in that case, I'm concerned with that.
To be honest, the first property adjacent to the property has a board fence on the 2 sides of it. And when Peralta first began the site plan process, solicited comments from those other 3 neighbors, and they indicated they did not want a board fence, that they would feel boxed in having a board fence back there. They're happy with the mature trees, and they wanted to see chain link. I reiterated that last week with them. I called them and I asked them, and they said the neighbors were adamant. They did not want a board fence. And their houses really, in all honesty, those 3 houses are quite a distance away from the back lot line.
Deputy Mayor?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Well, I think you know where I stand on this, Jackie. And I just remember now there's a resident too, and he still lives on Highway 77, who had somebody buy property next to him, and they repair trucks. And he too has a complaint about the noise and the dirt, primarily the dirt. And I know you said about setting a precedent, but what it is for us, for council, is we're trying to be consistent. We're trying to get properties cleaned up. We're trying to have a standard that we hold everyone to, and that's what we're doing. I'm very sympathetic about the cost. I understand the cost. I don't live in an ivory tower, but I also know how it affects the day-to-day person, dirt, noise, etc. I do want to see you also expand and do well, but I also know we have to recognize who lives next door to us. And that's my reason for supporting this. Not trying to be anti-business, not trying to be anti your professional opinion, but saying we need to look going forward of a standard that we're going to set and we're going to stick to. And we're going to recognize the people that are affected by businesses.
Councillor Jacobs?
Thank you, Worship. For the hours of operation, I know you have truck parking. That's not just for the repairs shop, I believe. Are you going to be just parking trucks that, like they're parked there, that they just keep moving in and out at all hours of the day and night? I guess the noise level is what I'm looking at here. Is it going to be a 24 operation?
Operation, but it's not something that we are just starting now. It's been going since 2007. We have had no issues as far as noise other than the very first neighbor who originally did not come in at all, and we had someone come in from your town to take a what do you call it, a noise level inspection, and we passed with flying colors on it. And we have since then, and this is probably going 3 years now, that we have not heard any any complaints at all. He was the only neighbor, but yes, it is at all hours coming in and out. The actual operation itself runs pretty much from 8 to 5.
And I appreciate that, but I guess where I was going with this, though, is that you're going to be expanding your truck parking out there, I would presume, because like these are the guys who used to park around Heinz over there and so forth, or by the arena and that. They're all moving out towards your area, I presume.
We've gotten a few guys from there, yes. I mean, the expansion that we're looking at right now for the property south to us, yes, it'll allow for about another 30 trucks to take and park in there.
And I'm not arguing with you about the decibels, the noise levels, and everything else that's going on, but you're well aware that different trucks have different sounds. Like some of these guys have no mufflers, some have some are,
Absolutely.
you can't even hear them running. But I guess that's where the concern would be, the neighbors with these things going 24/7, apparently. But that was just a concern I had with this. Thank you.
Councillor Hammond?
Your Worship, thank you. I have a couple of thoughts, maybe a little different than my fellow councillors, and that is that I could see the need for wanting to put in a certain amount of fence. I mean, if you put it at the rear of those property that face up onto 77 Highway, I think that's important, and possibly the fencing that would be directly north, and give a little leeway with respect to the fencing on the south, or on the that would be the west side, because really there's nothing in behind that at all right now anyway. So I personally wouldn't have too much of a difficulty in allowing some movement there. With respect to hard surfacing, it goes back to, and I understand that we can't answer that question tonight, but a lot of people are using that reused aggregate, that reused asphalt for hard surfacing, because I do appreciate the fact it'll cost a fortune to asphalt that entire parking lot, a fortune. And and I'm wondering if, I mean, you're expecting an answer tonight, and I would like to have had an answer with respect to what constitutes hard surfacing before I can really develop an opinion. Just one thing, though, that I wanted to comment, too, that Councillor Jacobs brought forward. There's a lot of problem with trucks, and you fellows know this better than I do. When they got their reefers running out back, and the fact that you're going to be parking a lot more vehicles out there, are they going to have their reefers running?
The majority of them will not be reefer trailers. A majority of them are flatbed trailers, so there won't be much of any kind of noise.
Well, I go to the arena a lot, and there were trucks that parked there a lot, and then the reefers were running quite a bit, same as the ones parked in behind the Walmart store over there off by Canadian Tire. Those guys, unfortunately, make it difficult for all the rest of the truckers because they leave the reefers running all night, and consequently bring forward these complaints that you hear. But anyway, those are my thoughts, and unfortunately, I'm not in a position to make a true comment about the asphalting because I'm not sure what's actually needed to put down.
Jackie?
Yes, I'd like to draw your attention to the bylaw. I've provided a copy of the bylaw in my PowerPoint presentation. And it shows that driveways and driveway approaches, and we've agreed that the driveway and the driveway approach would be hard surfaced to allow for the trucks to stop, and it's to the front of the homes. But to the satisfaction of the corporation and the municipality, that is critical. It allows for that flexibility for council to say what's acceptable as a hard surface. And that's where we're approaching council tonight saying, we know that you want to protect these people. A clear aggregate is a surface treatment that will not create dust, and it's not as cost prohibitive as asphalt. And that is your discretion under that bylaw provision to say to the satisfaction of the corporation, and that's why we're here. It doesn't define exactly what hard surface is, to give council that flexibility to be able to say exactly in this kind of circumstances that a 4.2 acre parcel of property doesn't need to see asphalt.
Councillor Verbeke.
Hard surface, Mayor, I'm going to have to kind of go along with Councillor Hammond. If that was possible, that a hard surface, but at least that recycled blacktop would be less dusty, so that you solve the dust problem. So, I mean, I'd like to see, I hate to defer things, but it ain't going to happen tonight unless it's going to go that way. But I don't think I'll be supporting this because there could be another option out there.
Councillor Jacobs.
Thank you, Worship. In regards to this hard surface, though, I guess would be up to administration to see if whatever they're proposing to put down would be acceptable. We're not actually saying it has to be asphalt, I don't believe. But if they're putting something down that's acceptable to administration, as Councillor Hammond is saying, maybe recycled materials or so forth. But I think all we're looking for here is that administration wants the opportunity to specify what's acceptable. And I don't think we're making a decision here by saying, yes, go ahead and meet site plan control. I think it would come up to Danielle or to Bashar, who's ever going to be issuing these permits once it meets those regulations.
Site plan control will be an agreement that will be brought forward, and we're looking for direction from council. We've come to an impasse. Administration is saying they want asphalt. We're saying that there are alternatives to asphalt. A 4.2 acre asphalt parking lot, I don't believe is really what council wants to see out in the rural area, and that there are alternatives such as the clear aggregate stone, such as a crushed asphalt. And that's where, yes, we are looking for direction from council to say an alternative to the full asphalt of a 4.2 acre parcel makes sense.
Councillor.
Thank you, Worship. But I think that, maybe there is some compromise that could be accomplished through this. Looking at 4.8, yeah, we're all in agreement that it's a costly venture. But maybe there's the alternative of that the entrance back to where you are proposing to put up the garage, maybe be asphalted to that extent, and then maybe there could be some agreement on site plan control to put stone down for the rest. I mean, there's options out there, and I think we have to give administration the ability to negotiate with you to come up with a compromise that would be beneficial to both parties. And I guess that's what this recommendation means to me. So I would be supporting what we're presenting, and it would be up to site plan control with your clients to come to a conclusion.
Councillor Wilkinson.
If I could.
Just wondering, have you looked into the recycled asphalt to get a price on what that would cost you versus a hard surface or the clear, the limestone you were talking about? Have you looked into that option?
I would love for you guys to come down there personally yourself and come and have a look at the driveway. We have one section of it that has got recycled asphalt on it. The other section is the hard stone that we were talking about, and that's a clear stone, so that you guys could come out and have an actual look at it. We have not had any complaints regarding dust whatsoever. About twice a year that we put salt grime down for dust control over the whole entire property. But just for the entrance itself, we have tested it with the hard stone that Jackie was talking to you guys about, and then the other section of it is recycled asphalt. When we originally did the parking lot, 6 inches of that and over the entire property is recycled asphalt on it. So I'd be more than happy for you guys to come and actually have a look at it so that you have an understanding of it, what it looks like and everything, and especially even on a dry day, like there's no dust.
Councillor Verbeke.
Worthy Mayor, the recommendation says no inkling of the word paved, so, but it doesn't say paved. As you know, so I mean, I'd almost, what do you do? Do you go by the recommendation, let them ballot out? Do you defer it to see if what the test is going to be for this hard stuff, or what do we do?
Oh, we're talking it through right now, but hard surface to me means pavement, so, and that's why we made the bylaw. Deputy Mayor?
Well, that's what I was going to ask, was if hard surface would include that kind of a surface, like the asphalty reground material, because I will remind you that Oak Street Trucking Company that we're talking about has hard surface a portion of the way, but the part that's behind the homes does not have it. None of those people came when we had the meeting, but now we're getting the calls. And that's why I'm like, I would like to see us have a standard that we hold everyone to avoid these kinds of situations. They may not have complained up till now, but we're talking more trucks, we're talking a bigger operation. I do think we have to have something there. And we also have to remember that when these properties are sold, the next guy may not do what the first guy did if it's not a hard surface. That's my only reason for being hard line on this, trying to avoid what we've had in the past with the complaints.
Mr. Neufeld?
Well, I think we want to go back to basic principles here, and I think that's what the deputy mayor was getting at. We want to keep the dust down. We don't want this to turn into some sort of a problem with the neighbors. None of us here tonight, I don't think, are able to establish exactly what a hard surface is or isn't, given that there may be new materials and new uses of these materials that may be as effective as what we traditionally think is pavement. I would suggest that administration does get a chance to look at these alternatives, because maybe it's something that we can use in the future in other areas, just based on the basic principle that we want to keep the dust down. But I think that would be within our engineering department. They're not here. It's unfair to ask Danielle. We can ask Danielle to give her planning opinion about hard surface, but I don't think that that's what we're looking for tonight. So I think we could still, my suggestion is we can still go forward with this, with administration getting the opportunity to take a look at the option that they're suggesting and see if it meets our needs. It's to the satisfaction of the corporation. And if we're at odds, they can come back and make their statement then. But that is what the bylaw says.
Councillor Verbeke?
And also, I would move it to 2 years for the fence, because like you say, you just leave the east side open for now, unless they get problems, then they can do it. But we know some of the greenhouses here that have put up fences, and it's been a lot of money to confine their area. So I would like to see 2 years on the site plan for the fence agreement.
Okay. From my perspective, a hard surface is a hard surface. So, but I'm not so closed-minded as to not have a consideration of what other alternatives might be out there. And I know we made this bylaw after the fact in a lot of circumstances, and we can't go back and force those people to hard surface their parking lots. And it's not just one issue on Oak Street. There are several of them around the area. But every time somebody makes a change to that property, that's when we can enforce this bylaw of hard surface. So we take advantage wherever possible. So I don't have a problem moving ahead on this either, with the consideration that admin looks at the other potential hard surfaces to meeting this. And Councillor Verbeke, I was going to say the same thing about the fencing. We've been lenient before on a recent development that's going up. I don't see why we can't be somewhat lenient on the fencing as well. But I think we still have to put a timeline to it and hold the property owners to that as well. So to go back to the CAO, are you suggesting then that we move the recommendation, amend it somewhat, or to change the wording in some way to reflect that we will look at other hard surfaces?
Well, I don't think that that's necessary with respect to the hard surface, because the recommendation says that hard surface shall be installed. If administration determines that the option that is being presented meets the standard of hard surface, then we're still meeting that direction, right? If administration looks at that option and says that is not a hard surface, then we'd have to have further discussions, I suppose, at the site plan, with respect to the site plan. But at least this way, we can continue on, and we will look at the option.
And everybody can move forward.
Right. You would need one amendment, though, with respect to the installation of the fence. I think we had 1 year, right, and change it to 2.
And Danielle, as our planner, is that an issue to change that from your perspective?
No, I think the important issue is that we're installing the fencing. So I'm drawing it out into 2 fencing issues. The privacy fencing along the rear of the residential lots, I think we should install that right away. The perimeter fence is shown on the site plan, and so normally if you're showing it, you're going to build it. So the alternative would be, when you come to build that fence, you're going to bring us an amended site plan. It's going to be reviewed at the development review, and we'll sign off on it at that time. But because it's shown, it needs to be included in the securities and reviewed with respect to MTO. If it's not going to be built now, don't show it. However, we can extend the timeline alternatively. It means that at that time when it's installed, MTO will have to look at it again. So to me, I think the portion that is the buffering or the privacy at the rear portion, it's still my position that it needs to be installed within the 1 year. We could accept a chain link fence with further details about the landscaping to be provided. It doesn't have to be an extended wood fence. And then as far as the perimeter fencing, to me, the perimeter fencing is a requirement of the owner and can be installed when they need it. And so if it's to be installed in 3 years, just be aware that it'll have to be reviewed by MTO again at that time when it is being installed. So 2 issues to me, fencing, buffering, and perimeter.
Okay. So Jackie, back to you then. Does that sound like a reasonable compromise this evening?
Being the 2-year amendment to allow for the fencing to be
Well,
built in the 2
actually,
years?
what Danielle is saying, that the privacy fencing across the back of the residential properties should go up in the year, and the rest of it can be done at whatever time is required.
Yeah, we'll work with Danielle. Yeah,
Okay.
we'll give those details.
And then the hard surfacing issue, we'll have admin take a look at the different possibilities and if it meets our requirements.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
So, to my clerk then, do we need to adjust the recommendation, or is it okay the way it is? Except for the wording of the year, 1 year. She's been making notes feverishly over here as we speak, so.
I would recommend that council divide number 2, that buffering and privacy fencing be installed along the perimeter of the property to the satisfaction of the municipality, which details including location, size, and type be shown on a revised site plan installed within the 1 year, and then you can add that the perimeter fence can be established whenever the applicant.
Okay. So, well, no, her mic was going off, but you have to slide that out. So, is council A-okay with the rewording accordingly? Everybody heard that okay? All right. Moved by Councillor Verbicki, supported by Councillor Jacobs. Discussion on the motion. All in favor? And carried. So I'm assuming everybody will be in touch with one another. Okay? Okay. Item number 3 is a report regarding zoning bylaw amendment on Mercy Road 5. And Brian? Oh, there you are. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry about that. Okay. The owner purchased the subject property with the intent to use the existing pole barns for their light manufacturing business known as Burtech Precision Industries and construct a single detached dwelling to reside in. It should be noted that light manufacturing uses are not permitted in the agriculture designation of the OP or the agricultural hobby farm zone. An ongoing property standards investigation has resulted in the owner's submission of a zoning bylaw amendment application requesting that a light manufacturing use be allowed in addition to those permitted under the agricultural hobby farm zone. A planning justification report to provide planning analysis and justification in support of the proposal was also submitted in conjunction with the application. Based on the review of the application and supporting planning justification report, administration was unclear if the applicant was requesting that a light manufacturing use be allowed as an additional use under the agricultural hobby farm zone or be recognized as a farm occupation or home occupation. Administration in turn has reviewed and considered each of the scenarios and is of the opinion that none of them are consistent with the direction of the PPS, conform to the policies of the county and municipalities OP, or satisfy the criteria to be considered when amending the zoning bylaw. With respect to the PPS, the non-agricultural uses and prime agriculture areas policies of the PPS indicate that there be a need within the planning horizon for additional land to be designated to accommodate the proposed use. The county and the municipalities OPs have forecasted growth and related land use requirements within the municipality over the planning horizon, which extends to 2031 and 2021 respectively. The county OP permits agriculture-related uses and secondary uses on lands designated agricultural. The county OP directs local municipalities to establish criteria in their OPs for the establishment of these uses. The municipal OP permits small-scale dry industrial uses on lands designated agricultural by way of a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment, provided that the amendment complies with the applicable criteria set forth in the OP. Administration is of the opinion that the amendment does not satisfy any of the criteria, which includes the two most important factors, that the use be directly related to and is required to be located in close proximity to a farm occupation. Administration is of the opinion that the light manufacturing use is not directly related to a farm operation. The former potato grading, packing, and shipping facility on the subject property that was previously on the subject property is an example of a use directly related to a farm operation. Processing potatoes grown from the on-site farm operation. Administration is also of the opinion that light manufacturing uses are not required to be located in close proximity to a farm operation. Small-scale dry industrial uses are generally only required in proximity to a farm operation when they involve activities not desired or appropriate to occur within a settlement area. The OP permits secondary uses within the agriculture designation in the form of farm occupations and home occupations, subject to meeting the applicable provisions of the zoning bylaw. Farm occupations are defined as the use of part of a main or accessory building for an occupation for gain or support that is clearly secondary and subordinate to the agricultural uses being carried out on the farm. Administration is of the opinion that the light manufacturing uses are clearly not secondary and subordinate to the small portion of farmland on the subject property. Lastly, home occupations are defined as the use of part of a dwelling unit or accessory building for an occupation which provides gain or support for at least one of the permanent residents of such dwelling unit and which is clearly secondary and subordinate to the main use of the dwelling unit as a private residence. Home occupations are a permitted use under the agricultural hobby farm zone, subject to complying with the home occupation provisions of the zoning bylaw. Administration is of the opinion that the light manufacturing use does not comply with all the home occupation provisions of the zoning bylaw. More specifically, administration is of the opinion that light manufacturing use is clearly not secondary and subordinate to the residential use, would alter the appearance of the accessory structures, has a potential to become a public nuisance, is not consistent with the definition of a home occupation, far exceeds the maximum gross floor area, and is at a scale which is more appropriate for a commercial, industrial, or industrial zone. In conclusion, administration has reviewed and deemed the application to be complete pursuant to the requirements of the Planning Act, however recommends that the application be refused and that it be directed to issue notice of refusal. If council chooses to approve the application, the applicant will be required to submit an official plan amendment application and all associated studies and supporting information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from council on this? Councillor Verbicki?